him on a successful G7. In recent days, Canada and its partners had an opportunity to come together and look at the major issues facing our world. Concerns about the global economy and the current state of our world were among the primary issues that we discussed. Through all our activities and discussions, I argued that it is more important than ever now for leaders to listen to their fellow citizens and take their concerns seriously.
Around the world, hardworking, middle-class people are already having a hard time making ends meet, even with a growing economy. They're worried about their jobs, about their businesses, about their future. They wonder what this uncertainty around the global economy means for their retirement, for their kids, for their community. We in Canada believe that we should put the best balance sheet in the G7 to work for the middle class. It's up to the leaders of all G7 countries to work together not only to avoid economic hardship, but to build a global economy that doesn't leave anyone behind and creates real jobs and real opportunities for people. That's why I asked for the G7 finance ministers to monitor any signs of risk and report back to their leaders so our countries can take concerted action to address them and maintain a strong and stable global economy, which in turn creates growth for Canadians. Another thing we discussed over the weekend was reforms to the World Trade Organization. To ensure that trade is not only free but fair, we need to have clear international trade rules. Canada is working with a group of WTO members known as the Ottawa Group to help modernize this organization in its crucial role of facilitating international trade and resolving disputes. And while we seek to reform and strengthen the WTO, Canada is also working with the EU to establish a new appellate mechanism so that it'll still be possible to trade disputes in the meantime. By taking these proactive steps, Canada is playing a leading role in bringing more certainty to the global economy while making it easier for companies to expand and create more of the good middle-class jobs people need. Le besoin de bâtir des économies qui profitent à tous est une priorité que la France partage et je suis heureux qu'elle ait choisi les inégalités comme thème central de sa présidence du G7. Aux quatre coins du monde, les fossés continuent de se creuser, qu'il s'agisse de ceux qui séparent les hommes et les femmes, les riches et les pauvres, les économies avancées et en développement. Ce sont des écarts qu'il faut absolument combler parce qu'ils érodent non seulement le niveau de vie de la classe moyenne, mais aussi la confiance des populations à l'égard du commerce mondial, de la coopération internationale et de la démocratie. Last year, Canada set up the Gender Equality Advisory Council to ensure that the conversations taking place at the G7 included gender equality at their very core. Whether we were mapping out how to better promote women in STEM or leading critical discussions about gender-based discrimination, the work of the Council shaped our vision of an inclusive G7 and a better world for all. It's fantastic that France chose to continue with the Council. Ambassador Hudon, who co-chaired the Council last year, has continued the important work Canada and its partners started in Charlevoix, like addressing gender-based violence and increasing the number of women in leadership positions. Canada also signed on to the Biarritz Partnership on Gender Equality and will be drawing on it for further actions. The partnership is a declaration committing to gender equality, including through the adoption of new and innovative laws, and with a specific focus on supporting survivors of conflict-related violence, as well as women and girls' education. Some of you may also remember that last year, working with our partners, we raised a historic $3.8 billion for women and girls' education in crisis and conflict situations. As part of this commitment, I highlighted a number of new projects to support girls' education because we know that when girls and women succeed, entire communities thrive. We also had the chance to meet with African leaders to talk about regional security, including in the Sahel region, and about helping people succeed in today's rapidly changing economy. On Saturday, we announced our support to a new initiative in Africa to help women entrepreneurs get ahead. Throughout its presidency, France has made a point of engaging with new partners who share the G7's core values of peace and democracy. It's a really important step to take if we are to build a more just and equal world. To create better initiatives and better tools that tackle the most pressing issues, we need a wide range of experience and expertise around the table. When I met with African leaders, we discussed the importance of encouraging growth through trade and attracting investment that benefits everyone, and we also spoke extensively about climate change and how we can work together to fight it.
The G7 also talked about peace and security. In recent days, we addressed a number of hot topics, including the nuclear tests in North Korea, rising tension with China, relations with Iran, problems in Libya, the situation in Ukraine, and the situation in Syria.
That Canada does not support Russia's reintegration to the G7. Russia has yet to change the behavior that led to its expulsion in 2014 and therefore should not be allowed back into the G7. Russia's aggression and illegal annexation of Crimea is completely unacceptable. Canada has and will always defend Ukraine's sovereignty. We also talked a lot about the climate crisis at this summit. People around the world are shocked and devastated to see the Amazon engulfed in flames. Minister Freeland has reached out to her counterparts in Brazil and Bolivia, and our government has been in touch with the Brazilian government to offer our support and to put an end to this crisis. Today, alongside other G7 countries, Canada is stepping up to fight the fires in the Amazon. Canada is offering to help by sending water bombers, as well as a financial contribution of $15 million. Excuse me. Now, we could pretend that the situation in the Amazon is just part of a natural cycle, but that's not exactly what's going on here. The toll of human activity and extreme weather events on our communities, our environment, our health, and our world will continue to climb unless we take decisive action. As part of our broader commitment to fight climate change, we've also made investments through the Canadian Climate Fund to finance climate adaptation and mitigation strategies in the Americas. Plus que jamais,
more than ever now, the major economies of the world must work together to reduce their emissions and meet their targets, as well as helping developing countries to adapt. G7 countries have made considerable progress in that area. In Charlevoix, we signed the Ocean Plastics Charter that proposes concrete measures to eliminate plastic pollution. To date, 64 large companies and 22 governments, including Peru recently, have supported the charter. In fact, Peru became the first Latin American country to support the charter. A few months after the G7 in Charlevoix, we organized the conference on the sustainable economy with Kenya and Japan. In Biarritz, we reasserted our commitment to protecting the environment and announced a new investment in the Green Fund, which will help developing countries to adapt to a changing climate. I also pointed out a number of actions that our government has taken to counter climate change, such as, like many G7 countries, Canada has determined to prohibit single-use plastics. We're also protecting our coasts and oceans and progressively eliminating coal, and we've put a price on pollution.
Overall, we've had a very productive few days here at the G7. I'm looking forward to building on the progress we made this weekend and work even more closely together to tackle the most pressing issues facing not just our countries, but the world. Thank you once again for joining us. I'm now happy to take your questions.
Hi, Prime Minister. You say you're optimistic about the ability to make progress on dealing with the challenging issues facing the world, but Donald Tusk gave a stark warning on the first day of the gathering here in Biarritz that this summit may be the last chance to restore the political community. There is no large-scale communique. It's reduced to a single page. So given that lack of consensus and possibly ambition, how confident are you that the G7 can be effective in the short to medium term to deal with a lot of the big issues, given that the U.S. president is offside on so many of them?
I was actually very pleased that we were able to come together on so many significant issues that matter to Canadians and indeed to people around the world. We came here to make sure that Canada's voice was loudly and clearly heard around the global table on issues that matter deeply to us and by extension to everyone around the world. So whether it was concrete confirmations of support and actions on a range of issues from the Amazon to the Middle East, or whether it was deeply discussing and following up on situations facing the global economy, we are very pleased with the significant dialogue and constructive conversations we move forward with.
Excuse me, you repeated your position that you would not welcome Russia back into the G7. Donald Trump cannot do that without support from the other members, but as chair of the summit next year, he can invite guests. If he invites Russia, what will you do? Would you attend the conference if Vladimir Putin is going there?
I have never shied away in global summits from tables around which Mr. Putin sat and contributed. I've had direct conversations with him in which I have reinforced Canada's concerns around a range of Russia's behaviors and actions. And given an opportunity, I will repeat myself and listen to what he has to say. I think the important thing is to recognize that the G7 is a gathering of like-minded nations that have committed to moving forward in a positive way for the global economy, and Russia's actions, both in Ukraine and in other ways, have clearly made it not eligible for partnership in this group of like-minded countries.
I've always been open to hearing from Mr. Putin at the G7, and I have had direct discussions with him. But what is clear to me is that with the actions that he and his government have taken, Russia cannot be considered a G7 partner. He obviously does not have the same values or the same approach as we do when it comes to engaging constructively in the world, and that is why he would not be welcome as a full partner in the G7 or G8. Radio-Canada, Mr. Trump has just said that the summit this year was more of a success than last year in terms of unity. Now, what did Mr. Macron succeed in doing that you did not succeed in doing? I must say I'm very pleased to see France's leadership of the G7. They have really focused and built on what we did in Charlevoix in terms of inequality and helping the middle class and the global economy, whether we're talking about ocean protection or helping people. We continue to build on priorities set out by Canadians. And in France and elsewhere, these are all priorities. You know that there's a media crisis, and there has been discussion of a new tax regime for digital companies. Now, are you prepared to bring in a regime that would mean that digital services would cost more for Canadians? Well, as we've always said, we're prepared to work with the international community and the OECD specifically to ensure that everyone pays their fair share. Yes, but the question is, will it cost more? Will you do something that would cost more for those digital services? Well, we are not yet at a point where we have found a solution. As you know, I always want to ensure that Canadians do not pay more for their services, but at the same time, we recognize that working in concert with the international community and web officials so that everyone can pay their fair share is something that I and all Canadians can support.
We've always been very, very clear. We will move forward on a global issue with our global partners, which is why we're happy to continue to work with the OECD on figuring out exactly how to make sure that everyone is paying their full and fair share. We recognize that Canadians shouldn't be paying more for their already very expensive internet and communication services, and that's something we will take into account as we move forward to ensure that the system is fair for everyone.
Prime Minister, you spoke about the importance of dealing with climate change through this forum. What message does it send when the President of the United States doesn't even show up for the working group on the topic today?
The President has made his perspective on climate change very clear, made it very clear over the past years. We believe that climate change is a real and existential threat to our planet, and that's why as a country and as a government we have moved forward unequivocally in leadership on climate change, whether it's putting a price on pollution or progressively phasing out coal or protecting our oceans or phasing out plastics. Canada has been unequivocal in its leadership on that, understanding that you cannot have a plan for the future of the economy unless you also have a plan to fight climate change. Now, the President and even some conservative politicians at home seem to disagree with us on that, but I'm very much looking forward to the election in which we get to have this conversation with Canadians.
President Trump has shared his perspective on fighting climate change many, many times, and everyone knows that I profoundly disagree with him on that. I know that the only way to have a plan for the future of the economy is to have one that will protect the environment and fight climate change. That's why we put a price on pollution, that's why we are protecting our oceans, and that's why we are now banning single-use plastics. And it's also why we are progressively eliminating coal. But Mr. Trump and even some politicians in Canada disagree with me on the need to protect the environment, and I'm looking forward in future weeks to have those conversations with Canadians to show them that Canadians in fact do want us to take action while at the same time creating economic growth.
Forest fires, the $22 million U.S. pledged by the G7 sounds like a very small number given how serious you seem to think the problem is. Why wasn't more offered, and why did the G7 not get behind a more robust initiative?
I can't speak for my G7 partners, but we are happy to announce right here, right now, that Canada will be investing $15 million ourselves towards this crisis in the Amazon, these forest fires in the Amazon, on top of sharing and sending down water bombers that are so significantly needed. One of the things we've seen over the past years as Canada has faced increasingly extreme wildfire events is there is a global network of support and friends that lean on each other, whether it's Mexican firefighters or even Australian firefighters. We've had many people come to help Canada during our difficult years, and I'm very happy to be able to say that we will be there to support our friends in South America as we fight a blaze that has impacts not just on their region but on our entire planet.
I'm very pleased to announce that we will be investing $15 million in assistance for the Amazon, in addition to sending them equipment, including water bombers. We benefited from the assistance of a number of countries and their firefighters, such as the Mexicans and the Australians, in recent circumstances in past years, and we're very happy to be part of that network that can provide concrete assistance to our friends in the Amazon.
What did you think of the decision to invite the Iranian foreign minister here, and did you have any direct contact with him?
We had a very robust conversation on Saturday night on the subject of Iran, where we agreed that not only do we need to ensure that Iran doesn't develop nuclear weapons, that we need to see a de-escalation and more peace and security in the region, and that should happen through engagement and dialogue with the Iranian government. That's why we were pleased to see the immediate next steps of dialogue beginning with Iran the following day. We don't have any direct diplomatic relations with Iran, but we are certainly part of the discussions that is calling for peace and de-escalation in the region.
On China, were you hoping to see a stronger stance on the 2 detained Canadians from the G7 as a whole?
Everyone around the table at the G7, indeed most of our partners around the world, have been very clear that the arbitrary detention of 2 Canadians is something that is of concern, obviously not just to Canada, but to the entire global community. It remains at the forefront of our preoccupations with China, and we will continue to bring it up at every occasion.
Hi, Eric Reguly with the Globe and Mail. I have a question on Brexit. Would you like to see Canada become the first country to strike a trade deal post-Brexit?
What we would very much like to see is a minimal amount of disruption to the British and global economy, regardless of the next steps taken. Certainly, Canada has deep ties of friendship and trade with the UK, and we would certainly hope to see that continue as smoothly as possible. Our officials will be getting together to continue to discuss how we can ensure that there is minimal disruption for Canadian businesses and for citizens around the world.
But could that include a trade deal, a separate trade deal, pretty much out of the gate?
We have been doing a very good job over the past 4 years of signing very big trade deals, whether it was with Europe, whether it was with North America, or indeed with the growing economies of Asia. And we look forward to having our officials continue the discussions that we've had over the past years with the United Kingdom on the issue of ensuring that the tremendously positive trade between our 2 countries continues in a way that is beneficial to us all.
Hello, Prime Minister.
Hello,
you for taking
Murray.
my questions. Murray Brewster with CBC. Does Canada have anything to contribute to the initiative that was launched by President Macron where Iran is concerned? What, if anything, can contribute to this?
We continue to be part of the global community that is calling concretely for a reduction of tensions in the region, and we support the JCPOA and its important goal of continuing to keep Iran from developing nuclear weapons. We have a range of sanctions on Iran. We just had equipment, indeed frigates, in the Persian Gulf as part of our engagement in the region. We're going to continue to support our partners as we strive for open mobility in the Persian Gulf and a de-escalation of the situation.
Prime Minister, your party campaigned on improving relations with Iran in 2015. That's not happened. Why hasn't it happened?
As Canadians well know, one of our first priorities in any situation is standing up for Canadians who are in difficulty around the world. We have done that consistently, had a number of very strong successes where we have engaged and gotten Canadians out of difficult situations, and there are a small number of consular cases in Iran that we continue to be preoccupied with.
Prime Minister, the U.S. President is reported to have disliked some of the conversations or the focuses of some of the meetings. He skipped the climate change working session. So how concerned are you when the U.S. takes over the presidency next year that conversations about gender and climate will not be part of the G7 next year?
I think the G7 is a really important moment for us to come together and discuss a range of important issues. The U.S. and Canadian pressure on this G7 ensured that there was a significant focus on the global economy. And there are always ways that people who come to the G7 can influence the topics of conversation and the discussions that are had. But anytime you get a number of significant global leaders together to talk about the big issues that the world is facing, regardless of where it is or who's sitting in the chair, there are opportunities to highlight concerns that Canadians have, concerns that people around the world have, and show leadership on how we solve them. So I always look forward to opportunities to get together with my counterparts and promote the things that both have worked in Canada, but also challenge people to move forward in the right direction on big global issues.
You seem pretty strategic in the way that you presented yourself at this summit, focusing on key campaign issues of yours, like the economy and climate. So how much were you playing more to a domestic audience than an international one with the election in mind?
When we had the opportunity to host the G7 last year in Charlevoix, our focus was on the global economy, was on growth for the middle class, and indeed on climate and oceans. The year before that, at the G7, we brought forward strong issues around the global economy and climate change. These are the issues that matter to Canadians and indeed matter to people around the world. We will always highlight them in our actions and in our engagements. The world depends on Canada to be there, to step up, to be part of shaping the solutions that are going to matter. We are tremendously fortunate in Canada to have a strong voice on the world stage that both benefits other people around the world and benefits Canadians by ensuring that their preoccupations are being responded to and create opportunities. I'm going to continue to do that every opportunity I get to serve and represent Canadians, either at home or on the world stage.
We recognize that at the G7, whether it was this year, last year, or in past or future years, we need to bring forward the concerns of Canadians. The state of the global economy is always a concern to Canadians because we are a country that very much depends on international trade. Concerns about climate change, again, this is always a concern for Canadians, and we will always talk about it. Gender equality, investing in the developing world. These are all concerns for Canadians, and we will always be highlighting them to ensure that Canada continues to have a strong voice at the table. Thank you very much.